Okay, so good day, class. So in this lecture video, we will continue on our previous discussion on, and the previous discussion, we were able to discuss about percentile and quartile. So in this lecture video, we'll be discussing the measures of variation. So we have the four type of variation: the range, the variance, the standard deviation, and the coefficient of variation. Okay, so I'll be discussing each and every one of this one. Okay, so first is the range. So okay, so before we discuss about the range, I need to tell you the definition of the variation. Study ng variation. So variation basically is just how you describe the spread of your data. Kung unsa siya kalagyo from each other o kung unsa siya kaduol from each other. Okay? So though your dataset, for example, have the same mean, so di mo na siya pasabot na kung parehang average, so pareha mong dataset, no. So, the variation basically just tells you kung unsa ka different, no, ang imuhang mga dataset from each other, unsa sila kalayua o unsa sila kaduula from each other. No, kaya na may mga dataset wherein they are very compact. Dul kay sila, like yung mga dataset are almost nagsunod ra. And then they have, for example, an average of 5. Tapos pwede sad ka makakuha og average of 5 with dataset that are actually very far from each other. Okay? So, ingana siya. So that is what the variation will actually tell you. Now, let's proceed to the range. What is range? Range is just a simple measure of variation. So, muna siyang pinakasayon. So, ang iyang gina-compute is just, ayan ang ginatanaw, unsay kalainan sa largest number nimo o sa smallest number sa imong dataset. Mora. Okay, so range is like, then the type of data usually that you contain, or katong unsay naa sa imong mga data. Like example, this one, so this is your data set, tapos gikumputa na to siya range. So your data set starts at 1 and ends at 14. So the range is just the difference from your maximum value to your minimum. So ato na siya minus. So 14 minus 1 is 13. So in this case, you have a range of 13 data set. So mo mo ang range mo ni ang number of data that you have, no? So kung ato nang ihapon, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have here, okay. So ang ginaihap ani is this one. So you have a data from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 5 to 6. Ato nang ihapon, that is 13 tanan. Okay? So, don't need to overcomplicate this one. It just means na muna siya ang imuhang set of data. So, you have around 13 variation of data. Your range of your data is around 13. Okay. So, why is it not used frequently? Because it ignores the way in which data are distributed. Again, variation tells you kung unsa kalagyo ug unsa kaduol sa imong dataset. Now, the range that does not tell you that. Okay? So, di mo siya though makitaan sa range ug unsa ka unsa kalayua ang mga variations sa imong data, like uh, though na kay 5 ka data set pero ang imuhang range is niabot og 50, sa ato pa nagkabungkag siya within the 50th, within the 1 to 50 nagbungkag ang imuhang dataset, no? Kana rin mapakita sa range. However, katong kung unsa gyud tong nasa sulod, no, unsa gyud kalayo atong nasa sulod sa dataset, sa katong range di niya mapakita. Okay, so here in the example, we have two dataset that has the same range of 5. Pero ato nakita diri ang kaning isa mas duol ang iyang mga dataset compared aning isa, which is lagyo, no? Lagyo si 7 padung kang 10, tapos ang 12 is mas daghan siya data compared sa uban. So that is what the range cannot tell you. Okay, and then also like the mean, range is very sensitive to outliers. So dili siya pwede gamiton if for example your data set has extreme outliers. Now to eliminate that kind of problem, no, kaya for example gusto gyud ka mo gamit og range, no, pwede ka mo gamit og interquartile range. Okay, and then the second is to eliminate the highest and the lowest value of observation. Okay, so pwede sa na siya. Like, for example, in this data set, no, kwaon ni mo ning si 7 ug si 12. Tapos ang mo evaluate is kanira si 8 ug si 10 ug si 11. Pwede sad ka mo gamit og interquartile range, which I'll be discussing in the next slide. Basically, interquartile range is just the difference from your third quartile, from your first quartile to your third quartile. So, kani siya nga area here. This is your interquartile range. Kani siya. Okay? So, for example, we have this data set, the 12, 30, 45, 57, 70. So, kung katurang interquartile range ang atong kwaon, katurang nasa 25th, no? Sugod ka sa 25th na index. Gamit tong formula nga akong gidiscuss last lecture video. Then, padung ka sa katong nasa 75th na quartile nga index. So, kanira nga mga data set ang imuhang pangitaan og range. So, pwede na siya nga na nga method. Okay? So, that is for the range. Now, let's go sa variance. So, variance has two types, no? The sample and the population variance. So, the same siya sa mean. Now, always take note, no? The variable. If you are dealing with sample data set, you should use S for the variance. Okay, if you are dealing with the population, you should use this symbol, the omega manyata ni small letter omega, I'm not sure, pero kani siya nga symbol ang inyong gamiton. Okay, now as you can see here sa variance, makita na ninyo. So this is the sample, this is the population mean. And kung sa sample nga variance, this is the sample mean. Okay, so sa ato pa, in finding the variance, you should already know your mean. Okay, so that is dito na siya variance. Sorry class, this is the square deviation. So yes, yeah, but they are called the variance. Okay, now what is the next is standard deviation. Standard deviation is just the the square root sa inyong variance. Okay, standard deviation is just the square root of your variance. So this one here, this entire formula here, that is your variance. Okay, this is the sample variance, which is represented as sample variance nga symbol S. So this is your sample variance. This is your sample variance here. This is S. Kaning nasa to nga. And then this one is your population variance. Okay? So, square root lang na. That is your standard deviation na. So, say standard deviation. Standard deviation is like shows the variation about the mean. So, sa ito pa, unsa ka layo ang imuhang dataset from the mean. Unsa sila kalagyo, no, sa imuhang mean. Bali, ang average nila nga distance from your mean. So, for example, you have there your data. Tapos, you have this one, and this is your mean. Galing na ito nga. Then, you have your data sets there and there. Standard deviation is like average distance, no, from all of your data set from your mean. ana siya. Okay? Okay, so now let's find out. This is an example on how to calculate your standard deviation. So for example, we have this following data set here, and then we have the number of data set which is 8, and then we have the mean of 16. So ito na siyang gisolve daan. Now let's find the sample, uh, the standard deviation of this data that we have. So ato lang siyang i-compute, no? We have our data 10 minus our mean which is 16. So ato siyang utrohon og review ang ato ang formula. So formula from the other slides look like this one. So S is equals to the square root of, no, the summation of your x minus your mean over apil ni siya sa square root, ha, kaning over n minus 1. Okay, so we have our x. This is our x values. X na sila. So x here, x1, x2, x3, and so on, but no, x8 man tingali. So we have the 10 minus the our mean which is 16 squared plus 12 minus 16, and then our n is 8 minus 1, so we have this one. Now if we solve that, natay 1 to 6 divided by 7, and so square root of that we have 4.24. Sa ato pa, kung ato ni siyang i-graph, our data is around 4 distance away from the mean. Okay, so that is one of the example for the standard deviation. Okay, so here consider this one, no? So we have the data A, we have the mean of 15, and then we have a standard deviation of a 3. So sa ato pa, most of the data are around 3 distance from 15. So 1, 2, 3, so na diri a 13. So na siya the pita. And then also 3 distance away from each other pod. Okay? So 1, 2, 3. So na pod siya diri a the pita. Okay, so ana siyang pasabot. Now, in data B, we have 15 as our mean, and the standard deviation of 0.9. Sa ito pa, wala ra nag-1 ang most of the distance sa yung data set. So, as you can see here, no, dual kaayo siya sa mean ng atong data set. And then, we have another data C here, which is our mean is 15 na diri, but our standard deviation is 4. Sa ito pa, lagyo kayo siya from our mean. Okay, so I hope you understand what standard deviation is for. Okay, so this is an example. So you may solve them on your own na lang tingali. Okay, so here we are dealing with the population. Okay, so there is no actual difference between a sample and the population, but the variables used and the setting of your problem here. Kung nag-ingon ng imuhang problem na nag-involve siya population, then you must use this one. If nag-involve siya sample, then you must use the letter S. Okay, so part na siya sa akong checkan if for example mag-quiz or mag-assignment about this one. Okay, so dili na nato basahon ang problem. So na daw tay data set which is 5, 7, 6, 9, 7, 4, and 6. Our problem here is to find the population variance. Ma'am, lahi lagi ni siya og formula. Nganong lahi na siya og formula, ma'am? Okay, so here this one is just sa man ninyo nakita. No, ayaw mo pagkailad ani. This one here is just the mean raman ni. This is the mean. Okay, same ra na siya. Mean ni siya, dire. So, iyaharang murag elaborate og maayo ang formula. Okay. So, here, ato siyang gisolve. we found the x values square of the sum. Okay, so add the x values and the square. So muna siya ang muna siya karon ng ato ang iyang gibuhat no para di mo maglibog is that iyan ni siyang gisolve daan tapos iyang gi-squared adisa niya gi over n. Okay, this is the same lang gihapon sa katong kaganina nga formula. If you're more comfortable using that formula, okay ra kayo. Okay, so ang iyang gipakita lang diri is just to show you that there is another way on solving the standard deviation, which is the same ra man gihapon practically. So in this case, iyang gi-squared una ang ato ang datas. Tapos uh, and then iyan na dayon ning gi-solve. So iyang gipangita si summation of x, which is 43. Tapos iyang gi-squared, which is 184, which is this one. And then ato and then the next is iyang gi-squared ang kada data this here para makuha ni siya. And then ato na din siyang gi-solve. Okay? This is very simple raman ni siyang approach. But iya lang ning giingani no para di siya magbalik-balik o solve. Okay? So, I hope nakagets mo. No? If you have problems with this one, contact me. Okay, so bali, this is our variance. Variance is the term wherein wala pa to nato gi-square root. If ato na ma-square root, that is now the standard deviation. Okay, so it's 2.4. When we square that, we have 1.5. So this is now the standard deviation of the data set that we have. Okay, sige, para maklaro gid nato. So this is the formula atong kopyahon diri sa PCAS. So try. So this is a formula nga iyang gigamit, no? And let's put it here. So this is the formula nga iyang gigamit. Okay. So ang iyang una gikuha is summation of all x, which is this one, summation of all x. Kana. Okay? Tapos iyahang gi-squared. Iyahang gi-squared this one, so ano ni siya, C189, which is this entire sa taas. Okay? Tapos kani siya iyahang gi-squared ang kada data. So which is this one. Okay. And then Rn is equivalent to 7. So muna dahil ni siya dire. Okay? So now this is now our variance. Tapos kung ato na siyang square root, this is our standard deviation. Okay, so that is an example. Here is another example which inang yan na pong gigamit is katunag yung naay bar. Okay. So let's read this example. Zenith Systems. The quality control manager at Zenith System, a manufacturer of equipment used in the oil and gas drilling business, recently performed 10 independent tests on parts attached to the equipment the company makes. In each test, 100 parts were examined and the number of defective parts were recorded. The test can be considered to be samples of all possible tests on 100 parts that could be conducted. To fully analyze the data, the manager can calculate the sample variance and standard deviation using the following step. Okay, so This is bali ang ilahang ginabuhat is ing ani. So they conducted 10 independent tests. Tapos sa kada test nag-involve og 100 parts. Tapos ila dahil yung gi-record ug pila sa 100 ang na-defect. Okay, so ing ana. Now that your job is to find the sample variance and the sample standard deviation. Okay, so in the problem, always take note na naghisgot siya og asa man to? Samples. So sa ato pa, this whole data set is a sample. Okay? So this is the data set that the company acquired. So in this test 1, I have 4 ka-defects. Sa test 2, I have 7 ka-defect. And so on and so forth until to test 10, which has 2 defects. Now this is the equation or the formula for standard deviation. Okay, so I guess maglibog na pud mo, ma'am, S squared lagi na siya. Okay, review ta sa inyong calculus or sa inyong algebra. S squared is just equivalent to square root of x minus x bar squared over n minus 1. Diba? Kung ato i-cancel ang square diri sa pikas, bali na to sa pikas, may mabay na siya square root. So this is just the standard deviation. Okay? Now, let's compute first of all the mean. So we have the defectives. The mean of the defective is 30, we have 30 no sa tanan defectives ka nakita. Then we have this one here, which is your data minus the mean. And then this one, your data minus the mean squared. So nga nang gipanguha nato ni nga data. Okay, so let's review our formula. This one, ato na po na siyang ibalhin sa pikas, no? Para sa ako amang good mas klaro, tapos mas makita nato unsa nga mga unsa yung gibuhat. Okay. So this is your formula. Okay, so that is your formula here. Now, consider unsa may mga unknowns na dapat nato makuha. So the unknowns, we should find this one, our mean. Next is we should find this one kaning nasa tunga. Okay, and then next is we should find the squared of katong nasa tunga, and then sum na dayon sa katutanan. Okay, so this is our data here. So this is the number of defectives. So this is our total number of data set. This is all of our data sets. If we add them together, this is equivalent to 30. Now, since 30 man kabuok, we can then find our average. So we have 10 data sets. Now, so we have 30 over 10, which is the average is 3. Okay, so we have the mean of 3.0. So what happened this here is just ato rang gi-minus. Gi-minus lang nato si x minus the mean, which is 3.0. So we have 1. 7 minus 3.0, we have 4. 1 minus 3.0 is negative 2, negative 3, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, this one here, ato lang ni siyang d squared. So this is 1 squared is 1. 4 squared is 16. Negative 2 squared is 4, and so on and so forth. So we have here 54. Okay? So, unsa man ni siya karon ng 54? This one here is muna ni ato ang kaning nasa taas tanan. Okay? Kana. So, muna ni siya karon na maglahi tag pen para so this one is this entire part there. Diba? Sakto ba ko? So, una, x minus mean na to, tapos atong gi-square, then atong gi-add, which is this one. Okay. So, sa katong mga naglibog pa gyud no, basically nahitabuan ni is just the same as 4 minus, pilay mean 3 squared plus, no, 7 minus 3 squared plus 1 minus 3 squared plus and so on and so forth. Kung ato na siyang i-plus tanan, this is equivalent sa 54. So, mura man po na siya. Nahitabo. Ani, iyang gibuhat diri. Iya lang gipasayon. Para, iyang gi-table form para dali ra siya masabtan. Okay. So, now we have kaning nasa taas. So, makompute na din nato siya tanan since kabalo naman ta sa n which is 10. So if we compute that, we have this one, the 6. Now if we square that, we have 2.4. So that is our standard deviation sa ato ang data. Okay, so this is our standard deviation. This one. Okay, so this is our SD. Okay, so I hope na nakasabot. If you are still confused, you can always read the book or find other tutorials about standard deviation on the internet. Okay. Next is the coefficient of variation. Okay, so the coefficient of variation basically just shows the percentage or uh, the percent or the ratio of your standard deviation and your mean. So, ana ra siya. So, this is the formula for the population. So, your standard deviation divided by your population standard deviation divided by your population mean times 100%. Okay, don't forget this is percentage. Okay, and for the sample, we have the sample standard deviation divided by the sample mean. Okay, so this just shows the variation relative to mean, basically ilang ratio. So, kung makita na to nga mas dako ang value ni CV sa ato pa, mas dako ang standard deviation compared kang mean. So, mas bungkag ang iyang dataset. If, for example, makita na to nga mas dako ang mean kaysa standard deviation, so mas compact ang ato ang dataset. Mo na siya si coefficient of variation. So here is an example. So we have the average price last year is 50% and the standard deviation is 5. So we have the coefficient of variation in this stock A example as is 10%. Tapos sa stock B is 5%. So both stocks have the same standard deviation, but stock B has less variable relative to its is less variable relative to its price. So sa ato pa si B do pareha sila average, no. Nakita nato nga si B di karon since mas dako man siya average, sa ato pa mas dako-dako iyang mga prices. Okay, do the same sila og kanang standard deviation, meaning pare-pareha sila kalagyo no ang mga datas, but mas mahal, no, mas dagko ang mga value ni stock B. Okay, so that ends our topic 3. Hope nga na amoy nasabtan. If wala, you can always ask me through messenger. Okay, and if you want to read more about this topic, you can always check the book that I provided. Dito raman ni tanan gikuha actually. So that is all for this lecture video. Hope you understood clearly what was discussed in this lecture video, and that will be all. And thank you all.